In episode number 420 of the Reasons I'm Broke podcast, we cover the latest Wonder Woman 1984 trailer as it debuted on DC Fandom.
We also have news on the return of Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead universe.
We also review TENET this week as we make our return to movie theaters.
All of this and so much more on today's show.
Hello and welcome to your award-winning The Reasons I'm Broke podcast, bringing you the reasons we're broke every single week, ranging from comics, movies, TV, video games, and more. I am Dome Ace Daniel.
What's a Dome Ace?
A fandom ace, the ace of the fandom.
Okay.
It all fits.
Fine, I see that. I am your almighty Emperor Kelli.
For those of you new to the show, the way we format it is first we go through the news. This week we have what's new on Netflix as we head into our September 2020 highlights. We go into the Patreon shoutouts, which are thank yous for those of you who make the show possible. We ended with our comic book highlight and our TENET spoiler review.
Our first bit of news this week is on the video game side. To celebrate 35 years of Super Mario Bros., Nintendo has announced Super Mario 3D All-Stars, a collection of 3 Super Mario games made up of Super Mario 64, Super Mario Galaxy, and Super Mario Sunshine.
So in addition to having higher resolutions than the original versions, the games have been optimized for a smooth gameplay experience on the Nintendo Switch.
There will be a limited production of Super Mario 3D All-Stars, which launches exclusively for the Nintendo Switch family of systems on September 18th. You will only be able to purchase them until approximately March 31st, 2021.
They have not said if this will be available digitally or physically after that date, so they're trying to make it a limited release. The physical copies of this is what I'm going to try to get. Even if I don't end up ever playing these, I haven't even touched Captain Tsubasa yet, which was my latest video game release. I don't know why I bought it, but I did. But this one is one that not only is it packed with 3 excellent games, but it also makes for a really cool collectible. Last time they did the 2D collection for the 20th anniversary, I don't remember what it was, but it was on the Nintendo Wii. That thing ended up being really hard to get.
Out of these 3 games, was Super Mario Galaxy the one you liked the most, played the most? Whatever.
Both, yeah. It's the one I played the most. I never really touched Sunshine. It was one of those launch titles, almost a launch title. But when it released, I think it was Zelda that I was more interested in. Twilight Princess we had been waiting for so long. And it didn't come out until the very end of the life cycle, but Sunshine is one that I, for whatever reason, just never played.
It was the same way for me. I remember when Sunshine came out, and I remember how much people liked it. So I watched a few people play it. I tried a little bit, and just never really got into it. I did play a lot of Super Mario 64, though, and I played Galaxy with you a little bit. I was always that star, like, no, Mario, I'll save you, Mario. But I definitely played a lot of 64. Got really far in the game. I think I had like 104 stars or something. I was shooting for that 120. It'll never happen. It would never happen now, even if I was playing. I'm just not that good at video games.
That's the one that I do want to play the most is Sunshine because I never got into it. And I've since seen a lot of people's gameplay, the way that you can use that turbojet in all kinds of really fun ways. And then for them to clean it up, have the nicer resolution on it, have the smooth gameplay on it, that's really the best way to play Sunshine at this point. And to go through Galaxy again, that would be an experience too, but I think I would jump right into Sunshine first.
I would definitely watch you play Sunshine. I do think I want to play the N64, Mario 64 again, because there were a lot of camera problems in that game, and I attributed that to a lot of the ways I wasn't good at it, because it was like, oh, the camera just turned. Oh my God, it was the camera's fault. But there were, especially those early levels, or the ones like the ice level with the penguin, where you had to go down that ice slide, and all those kind of things were just a lot of fun, like great childhood memories.
So far, as of today, they haven't yet put it up on pre-order anywhere. I'm hoping that the Lazy Gaming guys or Bobby or someone will find a link ahead of whoever. If not, I'll put one out on Twitter as well whenever pre-orders do go live. But, I mean, it's coming up quick. It's coming up, I think, on September 21st.
Yeah.
And that's, I believe, for the physical release of the game. So they're going to have to, these things are already done. It's a limited production.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a matter of trying to get your pre-ordered copy.
Do you honestly believe that after you can't get a physical, it'll still be available digitally?
Until that day, yeah, March 31st, 2021, and then they're probably going to drop it. And I guess if I had to, I could buy it digitally that way. But there's so many questions on buying digitally, especially on the Nintendo console, where they're not really as friendly about when you purchase something on the previous system, would you be able to access it on the new one?
Right.
They like to make you buy the same game over and over again.
And we do because we're suckers.
It works out pretty well, but if I knew I was guaranteed to be able to access that collection at any time in the future, maybe I would consider getting it digitally, just securing my copy, re-downloading it later if I needed to. But this is why I'm also a huge fan of physical releases, because when I buy that physical copy, it'll be on my shelf. It won't go out of date for, let's say, no longer available on the eShop. None of that nonsense. I'd have the physical cartridge. I'd have the physical whatever version of the game, and I can pop it in, play it whenever I want, not worry about internet connections. This is why I'm mainly a physical game, comic book, movie guy.
Blow on the cartridge, slam it in there.
Oh, yeah.
Turn it on like 4 times.
Small price to pay for availability.
Very true.
If they were to make this for Star Fox, and I know I'd be one of 5 copies sold, right? Because it is Star Fox.
Of course.
I still want to know if there's a way to play Star Fox 64 3D, even if it's the 3DS version or the N64 version. I'll pop into Lazy Gaming Guys on their Discord and ask them, but I really want to get into some Star Fox. I don't know why, a lot lately.
Yeah, because you read a fan fiction about Star Fox? I don't know.
Well, it's also because there was some stuff about Star Fox Zero possibly getting a re-release, but then I don't blame them. I wouldn't do it if I were them. Yes, I would play it with just the controls, but it's probably not going to be a profitable release for them, especially with how Zero ended up doing.
You will have to share the story of your fan fiction later because I think they all need to hear this.
I'll think about it.
But, stranger things have happened than Star Fox getting released. Again, we have Pokemon Snap coming out eventually. And you all thought that I was a liar and it was never going to happen. So I felt it in my soul.
There's also a big difference between Pokemon and Star Fox. I think the fan base is much larger.
Okay, but a difference between Star Fox and Pokemon Snap fans?
I think there's a big difference between Pokemon Snap fans and Star Fox fans.
That's right. There's 5 of you. There's 6 of us.
Right.
So it's perfect.
I know we haven't had a lot of gaming news because of just, we don't really play it as often anymore. And DC Fandom did just occur, so a lot of what we were getting from DC Comics and the DC Extended Universe we covered last week, but there's still a little bit more here that is coming out, and I know we forgot to talk about the Wonder Woman trailer, but on the world of the Snyderverse, we're actually getting 2 Snyderverses this and next year.
Of course, it wouldn't be the show if we didn't talk about Snyder. I think we should just change it to The Reasons I'm Broke and Zack Snyder.
Pretty much.
But director Zack Snyder, who of course is currently working on Justice League The Snyder Cut, which I know none of you have ever heard about before, is expanding his Army of the Dead universe with a prequel film and anime series greenlit by Netflix ahead of the 2021 film release.
I'm suddenly a huge anime fan. I love this. This is amazing.
Anime's
what a great medium.
I've loved anime forever.
The anime Army of the Dead Lost Vegas will feature the voice work of the film's star Dave Bautista and will be led by Batman The Dark Knight Returns director Jay Oliva as the showrunner.
Snyder himself will also direct 2 episodes of the series. Those will be your favorite episodes.
They'll be prime episodes for sure. And Dave Bautista, no matter what he did in the past with pedo perv James Gunn, that's separate. Zack would not ally himself with those kinds of people. So Dave, I can't wait to see him in Army of the Dead. He's pardoned. He worked with what he had. The script in front of him with the nipple jokes and all of that. He was just doing what he could.
That's what he had to do, right?
Yeah, and I liked him in the Bond film in the last Craig one.
I don't remember who he was.
He fights him in the train. He's like the really big guy.
I just remember the first scene of that one where it was like the Day of the Dead and he pulls off his mask and we're all like, "Wow!"
That was a great opening.
Oh my God, it was so good.
We have a quote here from Zack in a statement.
Quote, I'm incredibly excited for the opportunity to partner with Netflix again as we expand the Army of the Dead universe with both an international prequel as well as exploring the visually dynamic world of animation. It's been a great collaboration, and we are thrilled that Netflix sees this as big of an IP as I do, end quote.
A lot of investment from Netflix on this, because at first it was just the Army of the Dead solo film that they were going to release next year. Now we're talking about a prequel film and the anime series. Do you think any of this has to do with Snyder's name being really hot right now, with the Snyder Cut being all over the internet from the haters and the lovers, where Netflix is like, people are going to come out and watch or hate watch whatever we greenlight that is involved with Snyder at all?
Hell yeah, of course it is. Netflix is not dumb. Netflix finds what people are raving about and they pick it up and they run with it. Like Lucifer, for example, right? They probably sunk so much money into that and it's paying off for them. So they're just seeing this as another opportunity.
This is where on Twitter they were saying we're getting 2 Snyderverses now in the DC Extended Universe and now the Army of the Dead Snyderverse. It's just an amazing time to be a fan of Zack. Army of the Dead will be an action and heist film about a group of mercenaries in Las Vegas who venture into a quarantine zone infected by zombies in order to pull off a massive heist.
Listen, zombie things always do well too, so it just makes sense.
I think the zombies will return because, it kind of settled off after Walking Dead tapered on and people moved on from the show. The comic ended. They're going to be back and they're going to be huge again after all of this with this little universe from Netflix. Good on Zack, good on fans everywhere that want to support all of his work. And I know he's going to have the backing, of course, of the Snyder Cut movement when they flood Netflix and watch all of these properties. I did not expect a zombie anime series to be something I'm excited for, but here we are.
Only because it's got Zack Snyder's name on it.
You know quality when you see it. That's all I can say.
Did you see the first movie, what this is based off of? Because I didn't even know this was a thing.
That might be the only Zack Snyder film I've yet to see. I'd have to go through the full list, but I know for sure I hadn't seen the first of the Dead film that he did.
Well, I'm sure Netflix will have it up there soon enough if they don't already, so it'll be a good opportunity for us to check it out.
After everything that happened from DC fandom, it was a huge success. Many websites out there were saying that this really set the standard for digital conventions moving forward, that Disney should do their own copycat one at this point without shame because of how successful this was. Warner Media is looking to trademark HBO fandom, Max fandom, Warner Brothers fandom, Warner Media fandom, HBO Max fandom, and HBO fandom. Whenever they do this, it doesn't mean that they're going to use every single one, but this is more of keeping their options open, making sure that there is brand protection so that someone doesn't come out with their own digital event that happens to be called HBO fandom and siphons it into something negative that might hurt the company.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense, yeah, especially seeing, like you said, how successful it was, and I really genuinely believe that it was because so many people are talking about this that I never expected would, and yeah, I think it's really the right move for them.
Pulled in tons of viewers. Any podcast I listened to that covered DC fandom, even if they're not necessarily DC fans, they were praising how well run this was put together and how smoothly everything went.
The success of DC fandom, though, has raised some questions over physical versus digital only conventions. And in an interview with Variety, Warner Brothers TV Group President and Chief Marketing Officer Lisa Gregorian addressed this question with the following.
Quote, "There's a place for both. I don't think one negates the other. I just think that under the circumstances that we were in, we were able to come up with a solution for how to stay connected with our fans," end quote.
I definitely agree. I think once things get back to normal, there's definitely the opportunity or the option to have physical conventions maybe on a smaller level, and then you stream the panels, you stream all these other things, and yeah, okay, this one was free and that was awesome, but would you have paid $5 for this content?
That was one of the questions that AT&T Warner Media sent out to the A-list, and I answered it. I was like, I don't think that they should charge for this portion of it, DC Fandom, but I personally would have paid.
Right.
So maybe that's negating my own opinion, but I'm also recognizing that I am an AT&T shill at this point, and because they're giving me more of what I enjoy, which is from the DC universe, I'm willing to pay them to watch the streaming, but I know that the general audience at whole probably won't.
They probably won't, but I'm even thinking on a grander scale, right? So, last MegaCon we went to, it wasn't the same experience for us because we're a little bit older. We get tired more easily. We're coming with our child, and you really wanted to go and be able to see the panels, but the panels are overfilled and it's busy, and trying to coordinate and make it all the way across the convention in order to get to the next one. But if MegaCon said for $5 you can have access to every single panel, would you pay it?
That'd be, I don't know. For MegaCon, there's something about being in the panel asking the comic creators questions. So I would not pay to, because I like to ask questions. When I went with Scott, I think a couple of years ago, we put up an episode for the Greg Capullo panel and we put it up on here. I think one of us asked a question that year, and it was that's part of it. The interactivity, being there, seeing them. So I personally wouldn't.
All right. Well, then maybe I'm the not the majority. I would be like, but then you have like a portion where you could send in your question.
So you would pay to see a panel like on your phone for MegaCon?
but I'm saying it would be every panel, right? Every panel you wanted to see for $5, and I wouldn't have to go and invest the time and drive out there and spend $40 for the weekend. I don't know. That's just kind of where I am. I think as a whole, and whether they charge for it or not, this is something that conventions should look into, because I think they'll get, a lot more viewers, a lot more fans that are going to go this route, especially because in a year from now, there's still going to be people who are afraid to go out into the 40,000 people who show up for conventions. That's a lot. Like, we got really sick the last one we went to, and it wasn't even a pandemic.
That's that con crud that you get no matter what. And I think they're keeping their doors open by saying that they're not ruling out physical conventions. But to them, at least to me, that's telling me how well Fandom did.
Right.
That they should just keep doing this every year. If they want to have their convention presence by having your DC booth or your AT&T booth or whatever and sell merchandise on there, that's fine and all. But to have a San Diego Comic-Con type panel where, like they used to have, like, this is where we're going to announce Batman v Superman. I don't think that's needed anymore. I think they don't need San Diego Comic-Con. They can pull off their own events through their own website, which is DC Fandom, and then just sell exclusive merch at the different conventions.
Well, if you think about it, too, something like this has already been in play. You have E3 every year, right? Which, they have a physical convention, but then you can also tune in and you can see all the presentations from these big companies. And that does extremely well also. So, I mean, kind of the same thing. We've been doing this for a while. It's just being looked at more because of the environment that we're in.
And now that AT&T has taken over these parts, they're probably asking these questions of, right now they're consolidating everything that they bought. They're trying to make it as profitable as possible, cutting, for example, we talked about the DC titles, 20 to 25% of them are gone now or are ending because they were not profitable, or in fact, they were losing money on these books. So part of that is AT&T going, why would we fly out all of these celebrities all to San Diego and have that liability and all of the costs that come with that, instead of having them stream it or record something that we can then put together and put it up on our website.
Well, beyond that, too, how much more control do you have when you do it in that way to have better production, right?
Yep.
It's not faulty sound systems in a giant convention hall where you're trying to hear and you miss it because Billy Bob across the way is making some comments or his plastic sword is clanging while he's trying to sit down, right?
His Keyblade, thank you.
Yes, his Keyblade. So, I mean, like you said, it was the portions that I watched were very well put together. It was exciting. It was dynamic. I felt it was paced well and all these things. And so I think it's a great idea for them to look at ways that they can continue to expand this.
Per usual, we asked for some feedback on each of these news stories, and OmniJam tweeted in with, quote, "If Godzilla doesn't attack fandom, we riot," end quote. There needs to be a Godzilla fandom.
There sure should be.
I don't know if Godzilla versus Kong is the final one based on how Godzilla King of the Monsters performed, and it probably is, but if it had done extremely well and we had gotten the next two films, or at least another movie after Kong versus Godzilla, then you can say that this modern Godzilla universe should be worthy of something like that. But I think if they do another movie after Kong versus Godzilla, it's going to be a part of that Warner fandom or a more encompassing type of convention that isn't just for these different properties.
Has Netflix done a documentary on the history of Godzilla yet?
I don't believe so. There needs to be one.
Yeah, I would watch it, talk about the toys, no turtles on the shelf. And just kind of the history of how he's evolved and expanded.
Well, if anyone should do that, it'd be HBO Max.
Okay,
especially
fine.
with all the Godzilla films on there.
You're right. I'm sorry. I take it back.
As we said, because of fandom last week and all of the news that we got out of it, everything is a little bit lighter this week, but thankfully we have that movie review at the very end, but that does wrap up at least this week's news portion.
You are trying to skip over the same thing we skipped over last week.
Did I have it on the notes last week?
You did.
And I did skip it over again, didn't I? We do have the Wonder Woman 1984 fandom trailer this week because I skipped it last week and almost skipped it again today.
Get used to it.
You know, I think it kind of worked out that we skipped it last week, though, because when we went to see Tenet, which, of course, we're talking about in a little bit, there was a trailer for it, like, on the big screen. So we got to see it in the way that it was intended, rather than, you know, just on our phone or just on the TV. So it all worked out. We planned it this way, guys. we planned it. We knew this was going to happen.
As it says at the end of the trailer, only in theaters. So this is not going to be a direct-to-video release. They're going to bring it out into theaters. They're working with all of the big names, of course, to make this happen. What'd you think of the latest 1984 trailer?
Honestly, I think I like the first trailer more. I think the first trailer brought more excitement for me than this one did.
That's the one that had the music and the colors and all of that. This one was a more serious, grounded trailer, which I think gave us more of the plot of this film, which seems to be that things are coming to fruition for whatever desires these people have. For Diana, she wants Steve Trevor back, and so he does come back. And for Cheetah, she's going through this transformation. By the end of the movie, she looks like one of the traditional cheetahs from the comic books. I thought the trailer was fine. I'm sold on it regardless.
Of course.
But I think the first one that you and I were talking about had so many reveals that were huge, such as we're going to go back to more flashbacks from Diana's childhood. We're getting the lasso and the lightning and all of that, and possibly the invisible jet. They're in one, so I don't know if that's going to be the invisible jet. But now the biggest reveal here is that first look at Cheetah.
Yeah, and I think that was, I guess, why I like the first one more, because there were a lot of reveals, but there were also more mysteries, right, attached to that. Why is Steve Trevor here? Why are these all these other things? And I think as we have looked at this movie more and these trailers, we're kind of starting to come up with the answers. So then the reveals that happened, and a lot of it was also in the first one, right? Again, flying with lightning in the jet. Like you said, Cheetah was really the only other big reveal in this. So it's kind of like, okay, well, you just kind of... And not that they did this, but to me, it felt like they just kind of repackaged the first one and changed a few things and, you know, send us on our way.
Do you think, I know this is still done by the Stone Quarry, and Zack was talking about how he's still an associate producer on the film, but do you think this is another one of those fallouts from after Zack got kicked off the DCEU and they were all kind of doing their own thing? We know Aquaman and Shazam are a product of that. And Patty did say that after this film, she's not going to do another Wonder Woman. So she wanted to make sure that this one kind of had everything that she wanted to do in a Wonder Woman film. Do you think this is going to be more of that humorous, lighter, kind of general audience pleasing, just like Shazam and Aquaman were?
I really hope not. But, you know, from what we've seen since, you know, like you said, the fallout from Zack Snyder, what we've seen doesn't give me a lot of hope that this won't be that way. And I really hope, you know, you're listening to a podcast, and I mean, I guess I listen to them sometimes too when you're playing them. But, you know, they were talking about how this trailer doesn't really give a lot of hope that it's still going to have that heart and that emotion of the first one. And I feel like with the first one, when we saw those trailers, I did feel that heart from the very beginning. And I don't feel that with this one. And so, you know, I hope that it's as great as the first one, even better, right? And I hope that I really connect with the characters and feel for them and all these different things. But I just don't get that from this trailer.
Even though the first Wonder Woman was changed in that final act based on the final theatrical bit that we ended up getting, I do hold out hope that since it is still Patty Jenkins and we did like that first Wonder Woman film, it's not like the Aquaman or Shazam movies where it's like, all right, this is the first DC movie from this director, or at least in the extended universe. All right, maybe it wasn't for me. You have the option of like maybe not seeing the sequel if we don't want to, even though we're probably going to see Aquaman 2 to support Jason Momoa. And I think that's the same reason we're also seeing Wonder Woman 1984 is because we did like the first one and it is still by Patty Jenkins. So there's really not much of a reason for us not to see it aside from being worried that it doesn't quite fit into that initial plan of films.
Right. Agreed. Yeah, we'll still go see it. And of course, we'll have our thoughts right here on the show when we do.
Let's head into our highlights for this month. What's new on Netflix September 2020?
Keep in mind, these are not all of the highlights. This is just what pertains to Daniel and myself, things that we enjoy or are looking forward to watching.
The first one on here, they're putting back the Back to the Future trilogy on Netflix. This is awesome. I can replay these. I haven't brought it up, but we don't have any Back to the Future products right now in the store, so I guess technically I shouldn't play it, but there's that Back to the Future versus Transformers comic that's coming out.
There you go. Perfect.
There's an excuse right there. I'm glad the trilogy is back on there, and it's not just the third one like it had been for, I think, a year.
Oof. Next on the list, we have Grease, one of your least favorite movies.
It's good for the parents and moms, right? Don't they like that movie
No,
and the music?
Listen, I read a lot about this in one of my classes about how their relationship was incredibly toxic and how they pretty much just talk about raping women in most of the songs. So, no, I am no longer a fan of Grease. I never really was, but definitely not anymore.
Different times for sure.
Yep.
Another one on the list is Puss in Boots.
You really liked this for a while.
Well, I like the character a lot. I really like them in Shrek 2, even though I don't like cats. But Puss in Boots is one of the cats that I would probably be okay living with. It's basically Zorro, and it's voiced by Antonio. Right. I did not like the solo film, but I remember when they announced they were making it, I was so excited for it. And that was a popular character back when Shrek 2 came out.
Leo might enjoy it. We could play it for him.
There you go.
Next up, we have The Producers from 2005.
That's right. This is the more recent one with Matthew Broderick and Nathan Lane. Really funny. Also has Uma Thurman. I really enjoyed this one.
I never saw it, but I did hear a lot of good things about it.
Another one on this list is a documentary, Waiting for Superman. It tackles the school system as it was in the 2000s, from what I remember, and talks about some of the problems with testing, with grading, with how schools are ranked, and really outlines it on there. And I do recommend it, even though it is going to be dated at this point. A lot of those same things are still in place today.
Next up, we have Pokemon Journeys Season 2.
Exclusively on Netflix. I'm sure it airs somewhere on television, but Netflix did get the rights to stream full seasons of the Pokemon show, and then from there, they're probably re-airing it somewhere else. But this is the second season in which this is where he partners up with a different character, and there's been all this fan art of these two characters, and they're shipping them together.
Oh my goodness.
I still have to finish Pokemon Sun and Moon, but this is how kids are still getting into Pokemon is over Netflix, and that's kind of what made me realize, because I used to wonder, all right, kids are somehow still getting into Pokemon. They're coming into the store. They're asking for Pokemon cards. How are they staying hooked on this? And that's when I realized, of course, kids are now watching Netflix. They can watch as much Pokemon as they want. So many of the movies are on there. And this is exactly why. This is the kind of stuff that keeps Pokemon active.
Is there anybody that you do ship Ash with?
I guess Misty, if you really wanted to.
I thought you were going to say
down.
Latias or whatever.
Oh, you know what? Who was it? That girl from X and Y. They kiss at the very end of it. Yes.
What are you talking about?
Yes, May, I think.
No.
Yes, that's the one who I ship him with. Thank you for asking.
No,
Great question.
Just Misty.
Ancient Aliens Season 3 is also hitting Netflix.
Oh, okay.
For also, I don't know, for when you turn on the History Channel and then you go to sleep and then you wake up and you're like, fucking aliens. Now you can access them at any point on Netflix.
I just finished a college course on this, and there are no aliens.
On Ancient Aliens or just
on habitable worlds. I had to look at a valley of sea of stars and find a habitable world, and it was a pain in my ass.
See, no, this is why you didn't find anything. You're supposed to look in the pyramids, and you're supposed to look into the ancient Aztec and Mayan ruins.
Oh, okay.
And you got to find alien shit there.
Yeah. All right. Yep. Well, then I did it wrong.
You were going in the opposite direction.
My class did actually tell me that Mars and Venus at one point had a habitable atmosphere.
I think I heard about that too.
It was pretty cool.
Mars as well.
Yeah, as I said, Mars and Venus.
Okay.
You don't listen to me. This is what marriage is.
Another one on this list. I can't wait for this one. It is season 2 of the Taco Chronicles. I didn't even think there was going to be a season 2. They pretty much outlined the whole history of the tortilla in the first season.
The what Chronicles?
Taco?
The taco?
Taco.
They're tacos, Dan.
Tacos, burritos, gorditas, jalapenos. Gotta say it right.
Give me some of that queso.
It is really good. I think it's only in Spanish, though, so some of you out there may have to watch it subtitled, but some of you, like Omni, don't. They could just watch it like me. And...
Well, if somebody would teach me Spanish, then I wouldn't have to have subtitles.
Yeah.
It's been 12 years, Daniel.
You could also take a Spanish course as well in your college courses.
Or I could save money and just have my husband teach me Spanish. You're like, I'm moving on. What's next?
Last one on the highlights is Waiting. Also
Waiting for you to teach me Spanish.
This one stars Ryan Reynolds. And do you know what this one's about?
I'm still stuck on I'm waiting for you to teach me Spanish. Oh my God, I'm hilarious. No, Ryan Reynolds. What else does he do? He
was Green Lantern. It was Hal Jordan Green Lantern. Yeah.
What does he do in the movie?
So they're basically all servers, and it's one of those where it's like, oh, and this is what they do. They spit on people's food, and they take the serving industry and they hype it up to the highest degree. So if you were ever a server at a restaurant or a fast food place, then you'll kind of relate to these because you start seeing that customer that you've always had a problem with, and it's got this little story in it. I think if you weren't a server, maybe some of these jokes will kind of go over your head or won't hit quite the same. But I was working at IHOP at the time, and this movie came out, and it was like the perfect one. We would just talk about it, even among all of us.
I feel like I remember when this came out, and then people got like really anxious when they went out to eat, like, oh, they're just gonna spit in my food, and it's like that doesn't very rarely happens. It never happens at my restaurant. I mean, I'm sure there's some places where people are vindictive like that, but you could like kill somebody doing that.
It also has a small role by who's that comedian that stole Louis C.K.'s jokes?
Oh
and
my God, really Dane Cook.
Yes. He's one of the cooks in the kitchen, and he has a very short role. So that was also at the height of his popularity, too. So people were freaking out when they saw him in the movie.
All right. Well, maybe we'll have to watch it so I could be like, that's not real. That doesn't happen. But I do. The second you tell anybody who works in a restaurant, like, oh, you know, when that one customer walks in, we all have that customer. We all know. I thought of them right now. Yep. And I'm like, get out.
But those are our highlights for September 2020. If you want to see the full list, Google what's new on Netflix September 2020. It'll bring up, it should be the first or second search result.
But now we can move into our Patreon shout outs. These are our thank yous to everyone who helps make the show possible.
First shout out this week goes out to Bobby on Twitter at Cuban Slim.
Bobby picked up his Funko 2020 Summer Convention exclusive flocked Mewtwo Funko Pop.
I know he had missed out on it initially, but being that he is the Amiibo hunter, the Funko hunter, the whatever he's looking for, he will find it hunter. And of course, he got the Mewtwo flocked, and it is awesome. Really cool. I'm happy that they're doing flocked versions of all of these. I think all of these Pokemon are getting some kind of exclusive somewhere. And I got lucky with the Bulbasaur flocked one. Matt he used to do the Super Side Up podcast. He had offered to, back when they were going to do that particular convention, Emerald City Comic Con, to try to nab one through someone he knew. I think it was his sister. But when that got canceled due to COVID, they just put them all up, and I got lucky.
That's awesome.
Glad Bobby got his too.
Next up, we have John on Instagram at Johnny2Chips. On YouTube, he has a podcast, The Dom Chiodo Show.
John shared his CGC unboxing, which included a copy of Swamp Thing #1.
Ooh.
Really high grade on it. I think I will save it for when you watch the video. If you're in our Discord, you saw the link go up. But check out his video because you'll be pretty impressed with some of these older books and the high gradings they got.
Next up, we have Neil on Twitter at InMat68. on Instagram at inmats.photography.
Neil shared some micro shots of a flower and a bumblebee using his phone and a clip-on lens.
That's so cool.
You see the little bumblebee butt sticking out from the flower?
I love bumblebutts.
I won't get anywhere near those things, but I'm not as afraid of the bumblebee as I am the wasp or the hornet. Fucking hornet fucking with me the other day when I'm trying to mow the front lawn. That motherfucker.
And they tried to attack you walking in the house today.
And it went inside my shirt that same day that I was fucking mowing the lawn. Do you believe me now that they're out to get me?
I think they just want to be your friend.
They're not wanting to. Wasps are not friendly. Friendly and wasps do not go together in any form. They're assholes.
I think they're just
You've been stung by one.
I have been stung by one.
They're
he
dicks.
was like, get out of my way. And I'm like, no, you get out of my way. And he fucked off. That was it. He stung me because he was trying to get to you. He's like, why are you friends with him? And he won't be friends with me. You bitch.
He stung you. He stung AC. I don't know if Leo got stung by one. Might have been a spider, but how many more family members have to get stung before you accept that they're asshole creatures that are out to get me?
Well, I mean, they haven't stung you, so they're not out to get you, clearly.
Well, I'm careful as fuck. I watch them with a goddamn... I can notice them immediately. There's a sixth sense when it comes to these fucking things.
And I just bat them away. I'm like, get out of here, fucker. Go away.
I wish frogs would eat them. I don't know if they do, but...
Probably not.
Damn, I really wish they would.
Then they would be your super favorite animal.
They really would. Final shout out this week goes out to Brian on Twitter at MogoBroquette.
In a Twitter poll from Cup to Cup's Best MCU Movie of 2017, Brian responded with, quote, I tend to stay away from the most crappy universe, end quote.
Second that, Brian, and I think Kelli would say she would third that shit. Everyone back up that shit.
I would
no
say,
one wants any of this fucking
movie. I care.
There was like Guardians 2 on there, Spider-Man Homecoming, and some other bullshit, and it's like all of these are awful options. This is right when this is modern MCU where it's just all shit. But good on you, Brian. Very much agree, and thank you all so much, Bobby, John, Neil, and Brian, for your Patreon support.
If you too would like your Patreon shout out every single month for as little as $1 a month, 25 cents an episode, sometimes less, you too can have your shout out here on the show.
We also want to thank KingdomT-shirt.com. Jose, who runs that company, helps us out with the decals at the $5 reward tier.
But now that we are done with our shout outs, we can move into our comic book highlight of the week as chosen by you.
This week we have Batman number 98, The Joker War Part 4, as written by James Tynion IV, art by Jorge Jimenez, and colors by Tomeo Mori.
This is a continuation of a fight between Harley and Punchline, or Punching Bag.
Punchable.
Whatever, this dumb bitch. No. A continuation of their fight, and then, of course, Bruce kind of having a sort of revelation.
With Alfred, and there's a subtle return in a way between Batman and his acceptance of losing Alfred and the strength that he still has within him in his Bat family in Gotham. It's James Tynion. He loves this theme of Batman, of it's not just him by himself. Yes, he Batmans his way through the not the disease, but the Joker gas, the Jokerization that he got. And Harley's tea definitely helped. But in the end, he Batmans his way through it, stops Punchline. You must have loved this issue because it's Punchline getting beat up by Harley and stopped by Batman.
I did like a lot of things about this issue. I really enjoyed that you can definitely see the change in Harley from where she was, because, you know, Punchline even kind of goes through Harley's history a little bit and says, oh yeah, you were so dumb, you were so stupid, you want everybody to be dumb like you were because you fell for all this. And you see that Harley's really come out on the other side of that trauma from Joker, just to be like, oh no, honey, like you're falling for the same shit I was. And, you know, this is why, and you don't mean anything to him. And I know that you don't because I didn't, nobody else does. And really trying to get through to Punchline. You know, I was kind of disappointed in Punchline because I thought she had been built up to be better than this, but she's just, you know, falling for the Joker again, thinking, even though she's like, no, I have my own agenda. Like, no, you're still on the Joker's agenda. You still think he cares about you, and obviously he doesn't. And
that's what Harley was saying. She says the difference between you and I is just the Joker's way of manipulating you. He's still manipulating you. You think you've fallen in love with his mind, is what she says, and I fell in love with his heart. And he thinks he's tricking you into thinking that he's giving you each of those, but he's really not.
Right.
Punchable thinks that he is using her as part of this giant plan, but he does not care at all, as Batman, I think, was saying, or Alfred was saying, that he will just as quickly kill Punchline if it means getting to Batman. He will kill anyone around him because they're all expendable to get to Batman. And that's what Alfred was saying, that Batman is the complete opposite, where he will try to preserve as much of himself and Gotham as he can in stopping the Joker. So that's where the opposites go. And Harley, I think that's something that Punchable doesn't understand here, is that Harley it's not that she's dumb or she wants everyone to be as dumb as her, it's that she's played that role before. And I think that was always a role for her. And now this is a changed Harley Quinn, and at least in the comic books. You can say what you will about Batman Adventures Mad Love or in the animated series where she might have slept her way through college, but I think even regardless of all of that, she is still a much wiser and smarter character at the end of it.
Oh, for sure. I did really like all the moments with Alfred. I teared up a little bit when, he was just like, no, you can do this, and you need to let go of that guilt that all this happened to me, and your resentment towards these, 4 or 5 people that you feel let this happen to me, because they didn't, right? This is just what happens, and you're going to be stronger and you're going to push through it.
He needs to forgive himself, and that's one of the hardest things for Batman to do. As soon as Alfred died, he was asking, I should have done this. With Gotham right now burning, he's saying, I should have been doing this, and I let the Joker do this. And Alfred's saying, it's by sulking in that, you're not making the progress you need to. You're not being there for Gotham, and he needs to accept the situation as it is and move forward from here. And then later work on needing to forgive himself for whatever he needs to, but now's not the fucking time.
Right. Suck it up and just do this, and then you can worry about that later.
Right. So that's what, I thought it was a really solid issue, really strong one. I know that Punchline fans or speculators probably didn't like that this is pretty much the height of this arc for her. And I could be wrong. Maybe something happens near the end, then issue 100 something, I don't know. But so far, to me, I'm still not impressed by the character, especially when Harley Quinn breaks her down to her core and kind of exposes her for just being an earlier version of Harley, someone that also got fooled by the Joker, and that's really all she is right now.
Definitely agree. Still not impressed. I could do without her, but I did like Harley tearing her apart and just being like, no, honey, no.
We'll see what happens at the very end. Thank you all so much for voting for this issue. When we put up the new Comic Book Day poll on Wednesdays, you have the opportunity to vote and decide what we review every week.
But that does wrap up the majority of our show this week. We are going to move into a spoiler-filled TENET review. So if you have not seen the movie, you are interested in seeing it, you don't want it spoiled, you can definitely skip ahead to the Brocat block, which is what happened with Daniel and I. But we'll probably spend the next, I don't know. There's a lot to say about this movie. So the next little bit talking about TENET.
Why does it feel so strange?
You're not shooting the bullet. You're catching it.
Whoa.
I then went back in myself, felt like hell.
So TENET is directed by Christopher Nolan, who directed probably my favorite Batman film, Batman Begins, written by Christopher Nolan, who also wrote Interstellar. So fucking amazing. I love Interstellar. And it stars John David Washington from BlacKkKlansman, Elizabeth Debicki from The Great Gatsby, Robert Pattinson from Twilight, and Kenneth Branagh from Henry V.
Just a little bit of trivia about this film. Robert Pattinson, was
Can we just call him Battinson at this point?
Okay, fine. Robert Pattinson was only allowed to read the script in a locked room at Warner Brothers, and Michael Caine wasn't even allowed to read the entire screenplay. Nolan was able to complete post-production normally in spite of COVID.
That's an amazing thing. I'm glad that it got wrapped up and finished. Otherwise, we probably would not be seeing this movie until sometime next year. Estimated production budget of $205 million would make this the most expensive film ever made to have a person of color as the solo lead.
The way we're going to format our review, we're going to talk about story, acting, directing, and special effects.
We don't put any kind of rating on our reviews. We more or less just have a discussion. I think the rating doesn't really summarize how we feel about it at the very end of the day, because those things can also change over time. But instead just have a discussion about the story and so on and so forth, which was incredibly complex for what it was. And I'm not saying that I didn't understand it or I didn't get it, but it's something you needed to pay attention to. And it's not like, oh man, this is going to be way too much. I think even the general audience will enjoy it because of all of the amazing special effects in there, the really cool shots, the awesome acting. I think the pacing was one bit that maybe in the first fourth of the film, it dragged a little bit as it was doing that setup. He had to go meet Robert Pattinson. He had to go meet Michael Caine. And it kind of had a standstill there where it was a block of dialogue between all of these characters. But honestly, that's my small, I guess, complaint of this overall story, because it's all necessary to come together and really be what this really impressive piece of work ended up being.
I did enjoy this film, I will say, and of course I'm a more, I guess, average movie viewer than you are. The first half, not really the first half, the first third, first quarter, like you said, felt incredibly disjointed to me. So I know that it's all supposed to really make sense and wrap up by the end, but when you start talking about forward and backward time, then my mind started going, well, are these scenes out of order? And my mind was trying to make sense of that. And, you had to skip pieces like, when did he hear about Pattinson, right? How did he know to meet up with him? That was something that I didn't catch. The first scene, the first really portion in the opera house, I still don't really understand how that all fits into the movie. So disclaimer, it's definitely something that you will have to see a second, maybe even a third or a fourth time to really understand everything. And I even dived into the internet. I was like, somebody explain all these pieces for me, right? Tie them together in a really well succinct way. And there's still nothing like that out there. And I get that the movie just came out, and I'll give it a few more days and see if it comes up. But yeah, definitely something that you'd have to see multiple times and understand everything that happens throughout the film to really go back and really have a firm grasp of what happened.
The difference between this and something like The Fountain, which is one of my favorite movies of all time, I also had to watch that one multiple times before I really appreciated it and enjoyed it. I knew when I saw it the first time I liked it, but I didn't grasp the story. And I was completely okay with needing to watch it 2, 3, 4 more times to understand everything in it and truly appreciate it. I think until you see what the story is and how it all fits together, in these kinds of movies at least, it feels like a first watch when you see it for the first time, sitting down, knowing fully what is going on in the film. But there's something to be said also, seeing something like Tenet for the first time and you piecing everything together as much as you can, and kind of having that satisfaction of seeing, okay, so this is how this is going to play out. This is where this character came in. This is where we're getting that reverse shot and who was driving in there, and where the piece of the next equation ended up in this, how it ended up in the villain's hands. And it's really impressive. And I know it took him many years to put this story together. And it's even more difficult to do it out on live action with these practical special effects that Nolan likes to do, and that I really appreciate because it looks amazing when you're seeing it on the big screen.
It definitely did. I was really appreciative of a lot of those things that he did. And, I do like a movie that really challenges my mind and, expects me to put some pieces together. But I didn't feel like this movie really allowed me to do that and I won't really say an easy way, because it's never easy when you make those things, right? But I had moments where I figured things out, and I didn't really have aha moment about it. And so that was probably and I won't even call it a disappointment, but I was waiting for that moment, because even giant spoiler, when I was like, oh my God, she's a lady on the boat, right? Even that, I was just like, oh, okay, yeah, she was a lady on the boat, right? It wasn't really that, oh my God.
Well, that's one thing when you see that flash of it, and knowing Nolan and his films, it's like, all right, well, that's going to end up being someone she knows or her or something, and everything in there is intentional. And when you're watching a movie by a filmmaker who puts anything he puts in means something, it's for something, or it's going to have a payoff, then you already kind of are predisposed to, all right, well, now I know what that is. Or she's going back to the boat. Okay, so we understand that she's going to make her escape, and that's how she finds her freedom. So there's a lot of those that you can put together on your own as you're watching it. But I don't know. It was just really satisfying to see that. And I think the story itself was compelling enough to where I did care about these characters being protected. It got a little bit messy as to how quickly he got trusted when he made the inner circle with the villain. I think that's one problem I had with it. And kind of the ease of getting this mission through and done, especially near the beginning. But it was still, once it got to the halfway point to the end, I think those were the strongest portions of the film.
I would definitely agree. I was a little, I mean, again, going back to that first scene, why was he there in the first place? Right? What was his background? Because, and you know, it's interesting. I never even realized this. The main character doesn't even have a name. He's just called the protagonist through the whole thing. Doesn't even have a name. So I guess it leaves a lot up to our imagination and for us to determine who is he really. Obviously, we know who he is at the end, right? Who he grows into become. But there's really no information about him prior to. And yeah, so how is he the super specialist that can beat up and kill anybody? And how did he get recruited into this? And how did that whole first portion play out? And how did the guy not recognize him? And I don't know. It's a whole thing.
It was also really impressive that Nolan made this to try to be like a spy thriller, kind of like Bond. And he intentionally did not watch spy movies while making this or prepare to make it. But when I was watching it, I got that sense of this is like I could see him as a Bond, or this could be a Bond film. And yeah, it doesn't have any of the staples of a Bond movie, but it does work as a spy thriller in many ways. And I think that's where we can go into the acting performances by everyone here. The lead, John David Washington, I'm sure I've seen him in several things, but this is the first one that I know of in which he leads the movie that I've watched, at least. And he does play kind of like that, you were saying, that dangerous character who has all of this training. He takes down all those guys in the kitchen, the fucking guy with the meat, the meat mallet, and really, really cool character to watch and see him protect this mom and her kid for reasons that we maybe don't know yet until we analyze the film and figure out whose theory is correct and what Nolan really intended to do. But what'd you think of our lead, John David Washington?
I thought he was fine. I don't know that I really connected to many of the characters, if any. But yeah, I think, I fully believed that he was this person, even though I wanted to know his background. Where did he come from? How did he get recruited? Right? I still believed him, and I was discovering a lot with him. And I felt that he took us on that journey to really understand more and have that moment of disbelief every time something else was uncovered.
Elizabeth Debicki as the trapped mother in this role. Did you relate to her in any way as a mom to this character?
I guess a little bit, but at the same time, I have never been, and thankfully will never be, in that situation where it's I have to stay in this because you've taken my kid away from me. But I don't know the actions that she was taking, like, oh, I'm just going to stay here and see my kid, like, however often I can. And I get that her husband was this dangerous person, but, like, disappear in the night. I don't know. Like, just go.
Just go.
Just as if it's that easy, right? But I felt like I should have seen more action from her or more something. And I get that she gets her retribution in the end, and that's great. And, fighting with him in certain portions, but I don't know. Like, as a mom, I would just be like, just do more.
She does go through that character change, as you mentioned, by the end of where she does have that desperation that the villain was talking about.
Right.
Each character does go through their growth by the end of it. Maybe the one who doesn't grow at all and kind of plays the same type of character throughout the whole thing, and for the reason of he needed to keep everything as secretive as possible, was Robert Pattinson, and him leading our main character, the protagonist, throughout these missions, fully knowing that he knows way more than he should, but also explaining to the audience that it's better if he doesn't sit there and explain everything to anyone else that he may know, because then you're compromising the entire mission, the entire universe. Everything is as it should be and will happen. Everything that's happened has already happened. So it's just kind of like he's accepting the world as it is and kind of doing what he believes he should, acting on the moment. And I don't know what you think of. I know you really enjoyed his character.
Yeah, he was my favorite character in the whole thing. At the end, I was like, no, not Robert Pattinson, not Neil. He was really cool. And as you go through, he gives the characters, the audience, a few more hints as we go throughout, right? Helping us really uncover it, but kind of in a gentle way so that we aren't like mentally overloaded by this entropy, this forward back in time, and they both exist simultaneously, and you can't think of time as linear, and blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. Did you notice that he got less disheveled as the movie went on?
I did not.
So in the very beginning, I was like, Pattinson, do your hair. We're with this again. Your hair's like crazy. And then by the end, it was like more clean cut. And, of course, that's leading to the end of his life. But it would be great to go back and view it again and see, okay, maybe there's, and I'm sure there's a reason, right? There has to be a reason that he was super disheveled in the beginning, hair all over the place, looking exhausted, beard, cuckoo crazy, and then, just got better looking throughout the film.
How about our second year Hogwarts professor, Kenneth, as the villain, making people forget their memories with his spells? I almost didn't recognize him in this film. Like, he looked so much different than he did. Obviously, that was many years ago, but he played a pretty intimidating villain for this film. Like, you could really believe that he does have all of this power, that he is a very defeated character, has a purpose of, if I'm going to die, then the universe is going to come down with me too. And I believed all of it. Maybe at the end, I know he was indulging himself in his interactions with his wife and just trying to live in that moment and trying to soak up as much of that as possible. But maybe a little one note in a way. I could sort of understand a little bit what he was going through, but you can't really relate to the guy because he literally was there to just take everything as quickly as possible and only help his situation.
I think it would have been a little more impactful if we got more of his backstory. I know they explained it a little bit of he was just in this really troubled time, and that's why they sought him out because, right place, right time kind of thing for this person who's trying to help destroy the world. I really didn't understand why he wanted to keep his wife through this whole thing. And I guess we saw a little bit more that he probably did genuinely care about her towards the end, but there wasn't, I don't know. I think I would have been more convinced if he had moments of, really trying to be affectionate with her and then turning on a dime and, just being this evil man that he is. And again, that took me back to the whole, like, he doesn't really care about you, obviously. I get that he's trying to hold this over your head, but I don't understand why.
They did mention that if no one can have her, then if he couldn't have her, then no one can, and that's why he kept her kind of imprisoned.
I mean, I get that, but he didn't show that he cared about her enough to do that.
Gotcha.
He didn't show that he cared enough about anybody to want to keep her. And, I know that their relationship was what really had to drive the story, so I'm fine with it. It wasn't that distracting, but that was just something that stuck out of my mind of, I could see it in the very last scene when they're on the boat and he's trying to be affectionate with her a little bit, but you don't see that any other time in the movie.
Maybe one of the Brocat core members that when you were explaining that, I just realized you said maybe he doesn't really care about many of the characters, but he does of the protagonists. When they're sitting there, he had saved his life, but he told him, I feel like I've known you for years. And I'm wondering if that was also literally an intentional thing of maybe they did know each other at some point in the past or future, and there's some deeper connection between even those characters.
Right. Potentially. I mean, they were at the opera house, right?
Both of the characters were?
Yeah, wasn't he the guy who killed him?
That was pulling out his teeth? Was that the same guy?
I thought so.
I'd have to go back and see it again.
Right, that's what I said again. Like, the first portion of the film is just, I need to see it.
And is that first portion the beginning of or really in the future? Like, there's so much weirdness to it.
Because in that scene when he's like, I feel like I've known you forever, he mentions, do you like opera?
Right, and that's when he tells him. That's true.
Referencing that first scene, so but potentially.
Didn't they say that there was cargo from that was going into the opera house that he was trying to get? There was something.
Well, in the opera house, they save that final piece that he then kidnaps from the Polish or whatever that guy gets.
Okay.
That real weird box thing. Yeah, that's what they find in the opera house.
So, I mean, that might be enough for him to just get his attention by saying that. I don't know if that meant he was there, but that he knows something more than anyone else in his life.
Yeah.
There's a lot to dissect in here, but what'd you think? Those were our main leads, the actors, and I thought they were all very strong. Obviously, your favorite performance here was Robert Pattinson. Michael Caine did amazing. Always does great.
For the 5 seconds he was in it, yes.
He was himself. How about the directing and special effects? We had touched a little bit on the cars and how they were actually crashing against one another and driving backwards and all of this
and the
amazing stunt
plane
work.
and-
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, really great to watch. There wasn't, sometimes my problem with special effects is that it pulls you out of the film. This definitely didn't. Even the scenes, right? They have that parallel scene of where he fights the guy going forward in the first scene, and then like 2 hours later, it's the same fight but backwards. And really cool to see that and understand. I'm going to tie in the music with special effects.
Yes.
I don't know, is when they were backwards, the music was backwards, right? And really something that was very noticeable and made you feel uncomfortable, because that kind of concept is very uncomfortable to our minds.
When I was looking at the research and the trivia behind how they shot a lot of those things, I was thinking, all right, well, maybe they just reversed the footage for that portion and they fought it. And apparently Nolan made them fight backwards as well. And some of them even learned how to speak backwards while they were filming the movie.
That's wild.
I wonder if you can reverse the film in itself. Also, obviously the dialogue will be off, but if it'll play any differently if you do it that way.
I'm sure there's some scenes, because I was even, like I said, watching the movie, I was like, okay, is this really backwards? I need to remember these moments and try to piece it backwards to see what's different.
Yeah, so it was really neat, and I don't think Nolan has done something quite to this scale yet. He likes his mysteries and his puzzles and his reveals. We saw small bits of that in Inception. We saw that in Interstellar, but normally it's saved for the ending. But here it was all kind of revealed as you continued in the movie.
I think this is one of those films that we're going to be uncovering things from for a long time. Somebody's going to watch it a year from now and be like, oh my God, I never picked up on that piece of it. So definitely a lot in here to dissect.
I know when Heath Ledger passed away after The Dark Knight, people were saying Michael Caine had a quote of, I don't know if we're going to need to recast the Joker because we've got the Riddler. And people ran with that as a confirmation of Michael Caine saying in the next one, the Riddler is going to be. But that also makes me think Nolan, if set loose on like a Riddler Batman film, would have put all kinds of puzzles in the thing.
Yes, it would have been insane.
You'd have to put in that maze with the Hand of Fate from the animated series episode of If You're So Smart, Why Aren't You Rich?
Right.
They got to put on the goggles and go into that virtual world.
Oh my God.
Where Batman, they're trying to figure out the puzzle, and Robin says, no, don't go that way. That's where the Hand of Fate is. And Batman says, that's what I'm counting on.
And he rides the Hand of Fate.
He fucking rides it.
Fucking
And Riddler gets mad. He hacks the fucking thing. Oh, man, that was great. So I don't think that's how Nolan would solve that.
Probably not. One thing I did read about this movie, and I don't know if you noticed it. So remember we saw the red string from Pattinson's backpack, and that's how you know that he's the guy who, I don't know, dies like trying to open the cage. Well, that they also show that in the very first scene, he's the guy that saves the protagonist in the opera house.
Okay.
They show the same red tag.
So there's way more. Like you might even be able to connect the ending and the beginning as like a looping.
Like
I don't know.
Loop.
I wonder if that's another thing. But I think as people have access to it, once it releases physically or digitally, and people can start editing it and changing it, connecting different things, people are going to make some kind of cut of this that it maybe is one directional or something. Just really neat things that you can do with this. I don't think
absolutely
I've ever seen a movie like this at all.
None of us have. We can't think of time linearly.
Would you recommend Tenet overall if you're, a Nolan fan, or if you're just trying to relax and watch something? Who would you recommend this for?
I would definitely recommend it to the people who like to think about their movies after they've seen it. I definitely don't think this is something that you go to watch to relax, because it is very high stakes through most of it. It is very intense through most of it. And your mind really has to be working from that very first scene to understand and get as much from this movie as you're going to. So if you're looking for an escape, for something easy to watch where you can, I don't know, laugh about it and forget about life for a little while, this isn't it. This is something you're going to see once in theaters for the great experience and to see it on the big screen, and then you're going to want to pick it up or rent it or watch it at least one more time now that you have the full picture to be able to go in and see all the little things.
I wouldn't say this is my favorite Nolan film, and I would still like Batman Begins. Interstellar is excellent. It is a must watch, I would say, for sure, in one of those like watch before you die, simply for the fact that not only is it something that's unique to any, at least my experience, but it's also well made. So it's not just the sake of watching because it's different. It's also really well done. And if you look at the scope of everything and all the work that must have gone into the pre-planning for every scene to make sure that it fits, it's absolutely staggering. And that on its own is really impressive that they pulled it off extremely well.
I would agree. I don't think we've ever seen anything like this before, and it would be interesting years from now to kind of look at and understand how this influenced other stories, other movies that are coming out, and to really challenge our minds in that way.
As we mentioned at the very beginning, we did go back into theaters to watch this. This wasn't a video on demand. Nolan wanted this to be the first movie to open after the COVID closures. And what'd you think of your theatrical experience to anyone out there that might be apprehensive about going to see this?
So for me, it was much more, I won't say the word safe, right? There were many more precautions than I expected there to be. Now, keep in mind, we went to see this movie on a Monday night, right? Not a lot of people are really out on Monday nights, but the theater itself was, for the most part, empty. We went to a theater where you can reserve your seat. So there were at least 2 seats in between every single couple, right? Every single moviegoer that was there, you had the option. And I don't know if it was intentional.
It definitely was.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, definitely a lot of space in between everyone. There were signs everywhere, right? Stand here, 6 feet apart. We're sanitizing the restrooms every 30 minutes. Not that I ever witnessed anybody doing it, but it wasn't like I sat in the restroom for 30 minutes, right? Trying to see if these things were happening. Concessions, everybody, there was screens and gloves, and there were even some concessions not available to make sure that it was safe, like my coffee. It's fine. I didn't need coffee. My first experience back in the theater. But for me, and of course, everybody that I saw was wearing a mask also. It wasn't like people were going into this just to go and say, well, I'm just going to do what I want, right? They were very respectful of the standards that were in place.
The movie snacks, too, I felt the theater went out of its way to really market the fact that they're doing what they can to make sure that it is a safe environment. All the snacks and food were discounted on top of everything else, which was really, really nice. And when I did sit in the theater, I wasn't worried about, catching some airborne thing from the person next to me, because as you mentioned, there was 2 to 3 seats, and it's those big seats that were separated and force separated from each person. When you reserve your seats, you can't get the persons right next to you or the one right after that. And from what we know of COVID, it's not something that, you're in a theater and you're going to catch it from sitting 6 feet. I mean, you're going to be okay unless you're sitting right next to someone that's infected. Then maybe you'll catch it, but that's not the case in here. And I think a lot of that fear isn't there for me because I work in retail and I ring people up within 6 feet. So if I'm going to catch it, I'm going to catch it at work. I'm not going to catch it sitting in a movie theater where I am very separated from the next person. I'm seeing many people each day when I go to work 5 days a week within 6 feet of everyone. So that's where I'm going to get it if I get it at all.
And it wasn't like I didn't hear anybody in the theater coughing or sneezing or, anything like that. I believe that they probably sanitized the seats after everybody left, and I don't know that for a fact. But.
Well, because we didn't see it, but they did show you in the theater the ad of, this is what we do. Please make sure to clean up all of your trash, because after each person, we do go in and they put a spray in every single seat that it's like a mechanical spray, industrial one, and then they wipe it down after it's sanitized. So they're saying, pick up your stuff because it's going to make this a lot easier on us. And that's something that should have always been there. And I worked in the movie theater, and that always sucked when people would just leave their giant pile of garbage on the seat instead of just taking it to the garbage can, which is on your way out anyway.
So overall, I felt that it was a great, safe, fun experience. I'm happy that we got to go back into the theaters. I know it's something that you really enjoyed and have really missed. So especially getting to see this movie as the first one in months, I think was really great.
I was very happy to support. So we ended up going to Cinemark, supporting that local theater. We did not cancel our Cinemark pass to go see it. So I think I had a ticket or 2 backed up from when they were doing the closures. And I know they did stop the charging for a few months during the closures, and now they're back. But even then, I would have been happy to just rack up the tickets anyway, because I'm going to use them. And right now, our next planned film to see in theaters is Wonder Woman 1984 next month on October 2nd.
Did you have any other thoughts about the movie? Is this I mean, I'm sure you said it already, but a definitely go see for you?
Absolutely. If you're able to, check it out in any way you'd like. I will say if you're apprehensive about the movie theater, those are the precautions that we saw. And we're both, as of a few days later, actually almost a week later, no symptoms. We're healthy. We're okay. So again, I work in retail though. I work out in the public. So I'm more not concerned, but if I'm going to get it, it's going to be there. So there's a different mentality when it comes to me and how I look at this disease than someone who maybe works at home or works in an office or is working only from home or might be predisposed to a condition. And to them, this could be life or death, or they know someone that is predisposed to that condition. So I understand all of those things. I'm just speaking from my experience here.
Same.
Let's head into the final portion of this week's episode. It is the Brocat Block.
This is what happened with Daniel and I this week. Obviously, the big one was going to see Tenet. Did you have anything else that happened this week?
This last month, August 2020, was the show's most downloaded month in its 8-year history. September now is making an argument to be the top one as well. Like, we've had this huge monster month of August. Previous to that, it was July of last year was our most downloaded month for the show's history. And I don't know if it's that people are going back to work. I don't know if people are discovering the show more because of the Snyder Cut announcements. Our podcast is a very DC heavy show, so that's probably a big portion of it. As DC fans go out and seek more DC content, they're probably coming across ours, seeing that this might be something for them because these are two people that sound like me when I talk about the things that I like in the Batman universe or in the DC universe. So that all of those things could probably be it. And I'm really grateful for that. If this is your first episode or one of your first ones, we hope you enjoyed it enough to join us again next week, or maybe check out last week's. And that's been huge. It's a huge encouragement for us, I think. That does not at all discount the amount of broquettes that have been there since the beginning, when we just had a couple of downloads each week, and I was perfectly happy with that. This is still a great creative outlet for myself, and I really enjoy doing the show with you, and just seeing that there's this massive progress on the other end tells me that someone out there is enjoying it.
You showed me the numbers and I was like, oh man, that many people want to listen to me?
And I think that's one of those things where podcasters understand, or at least the podcasters that have been doing this for years understand that podcasts the numbers are never going to be Rogan numbers, because that's like a 1% in the whole podcasting community. This is not like YouTube, where you can put up a video and it's going to be a viral thing that you get hundreds of thousands of downloads and 18,000 subs or any of that. But instead we picture it, and I've heard this many times on different podcasting channels, you picture it as, look at the number of people downloading your show each week, and imagine that number of people like at a convention hall, and they're just sitting there listening to you. And that kind of puts things in perspective for anyone that might be struggling with, well, I only have 20 people listening to this episode. It's like, all right, that's 20 people that are sitting there and listening to your ass. Like, that's pretty huge. I
mean, at the end of the day, like you say all the time, this is a creative outlet for you. It's something we get to do together. It's something we enjoy. This is like the only hour that we get to sit down together and really talk, right? And so even if it's just a few people that get something out of this, it's worth it to us to still put it out, to still talk, to still share my palpiness with the world.
The biggest event was being able to go to the movies with the Palpa Kelli. I did have a discovered new quirk with DC and their fucking ordering, in which anytime it's a week that involves a holiday, which means that the DC offices or the distribution offices are going to be closed for that day, they're going to need their final order cutoffs that week one day earlier than usual. As I've already constantly bitched about the day and a half / maybe 2 days of data that we get from sales before I do my orders every week, as opposed to the 4 days that the Indie and Marvel publishers give me, which are more accurate numbers. On a week like that, which was this week, DC gives me 1 day of data, literally just new comic book day of data to do my ordering. Hey, here's your Batman 98 sales. How many did you sell today? Now order the ones in 4 weeks for Batman 99. Don't worry about what you're going to sell Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. That's clearly irrelevant. It doesn't matter because you've already put in your number, so fuck yourself. Like, it just sucks so much, and that's another thing that I've discovered from DC. It's bullshit. I'm going to keep complaining about it, and it makes me more willing to work with the indie and Marvel FLCs because I'm like, hell yeah, now I'm more confident about ordering those numbers than I am DC's. Those are going to be under or over every single week without fail. That's the way it is.
Some good news from me is I finished Lucifer. That's what I did this week. I binged it. I don't know where I found the time. I neglected homework. That's what I did. But I binged Lucifer. I got to the end of season 5, part 1.
Mm-hmm.
Still in love with the show. I have 3 more people at work watching it because I was just raving about it. And now they're in love with the show too. And I'm like, yes. So they still haven't announced when season 5, part 2 is going to come out. Tom Ellis is saying Christmas or, the next year. They only have half of the last episode to film.
Okay.
So once COVID opens up, they're going to film the last half of that episode, and then of course it's all the editing, production, etc., to get it out to all of us. So I can't wait. It was a solid season. Definitely a woman show. If you're
what's that mean? I don't know what you mean by that.
It's very romance heavy. It's all about the drama between the characters and not the murders.
I'm gonna keep my mouth shut.
That's fine. You can keep your mouth
2020.
shut.
You can say those things. I cannot.
That's fine. I'll say them.
And that's cool. I'm glad you got to see that. And that's basically it for the week on my end.
Yeah, that's pretty much all that happened for me. A book from my favorite author released. Oh, I still haven't read any more of Twilight, in case anybody's wondering, why hasn't Kelli said anything? I gave up. I'll go back and read it again. But anyway, one of my favorite authors released another book, so I'm trying to get through that. But I don't know. I get distracted. There's too much going on in life. So much.
Pretty hefty episode in spite of the light news, thanks to the TENET review and to you voting in for this week's comic book highlight. But thank you all so much once again for joining us on today's episode and every week, whether you just discovered it or have been listening since September 2012. I've been Ace Dome Daniel, or Dome Ace Daniel.
And I am Emperor Palpa Kelli.
And Brocat Core. All will be well. So I guess I have to talk about that fan fiction from Star Fox.
Oh, hell yeah, you do. I forgot about that.
From that Twitter account that
so good.
Only pulls up terrible fan fiction from fanfiction.net.
Best fanfic I've ever heard.
And of course there was a Star Fox one. And it follows that trope, which you had to sort of explain to me of this person, whoever wrote this, hates Crystal from Star Fox, who we know from Star Fox Adventures, Dinosaur Planet. And instead made an original character who's, in their mind, a superior female version of that character or something. And they made her really edgy and flicking off Crystal, calling her a fucking slut and all of this. So when you hate a character in a franchise, when you write fan fiction, is it a teenager's job to just drag that character no matter what and beg the company to put their original character in the next game?
I don't know that you would beg the company to put you probably do beg them to put your original character in something, because that's the goal, right? That your fanfic takes off and it becomes something substantial, like, I don't know, 50 Shades of Grey, right? Started out as a Twilight fan fiction and became something.
Okay.
Did you know that?
I didn't know it was a Twilight fan fiction.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe you told me at one point, but I didn't know it was tied to a franchise in that way.
Yeah, it was a Twilight fan fiction. There's also another one, Beautiful Bastard or something like that, which was also a Twilight fan fiction that became not as big as 50 Shades, but more well received from the general reading audience. Anyway, I digress. That's always the goal, right? You write a fan fiction, you're like, maybe somebody from somewhere will see this, because when you're a teenager, that's how your mind works. So yes, when you hate somebody in a show, anything you write, they're a terrible person. And I was explaining this to you, Hojo from Inuyasha, who was nothing but a nice guy who's just trying to take care of Kagome, but we hate him because he's not Inuyasha. And in every fan fiction, he's the evil villain who's doing this to try and become her friend, to only reveal his true intentions. This 15-year-old kid is just really, the super evil baddie.
Any excuse to drag the character into everyone's mind so that everyone sees him as they really are. In this case, Crystal. And at one point, at what point do the characters just start cursing and yelling, "Fuck you, motherfucker, bring her back to me"? Everyone curses in these fanfics.
But the thing is, when you're 14, that's what's cool. You don't think about Daniel at 14, right? It is a very different mindset than Daniel at not 14. And you grow up and you're like, yeah, that's not really cool. It has to be with intention. But when you're 14 and you're just starting to curse, everything is fuck this and fuck that. And you try to sound more adult by doing that.
Well, bless fanfiction.net because it is incredible content from up-and-coming writers.
I think this is the first fan fiction you're actually going to read the whole thing.
I'm caught up on it. 15
Oh my
pages. Half the cast are now gay, and I didn't even know. Like Leon from Star Fox is now gay, and I'm Fox McCloud, and I'm like, all right. And apparently the author only did this to prove that they're not a homophobe because that's in the author notes. Like, you see, I'm not a homophobe, you fucking assholes. You go to hell. And I'm like, this is some hot garbage, not just like, not necessarily just a written work. That's entertaining as hell, and that's kind of what I'm there to do, right? Just be entertained. But this person's mental state is incredibly unstable. And then I read these comments and I'm like, they're not helping. But just let them finish the story first if you're really going to go after them.
Let me finish. I love the way that they describe these sex scenes, though. And then they do it.
Yeah.
You've clearly never had sex, person. So that's fine.